Today I'm going to talk to you about art and the common good through a series of observations and details which support a pretty clear and simple thesis. Art is essential to the common good. We'll look at how art has furthered the common good in the past, and I hope that will inspire us all to appreciate how art furthers the common good today and will continue to do so in the future. Basically, I'm going to talk about things that I find really interesting, and I hope you do too. Since art sometimes challenges us and the status quo, I'd like to begin a little differently today. First, I'd like you to introduce yourself to someone you do not know in the room and share with them a work of art that is meaningful to you. Maybe your favorite movie, your favorite poem, your favorite painting, your favorite piece of sculpture, and just take a few minutes and introduce yourself to someone you don't know, you have never met before, and just tell them what your favorite work of art is. So, thank you. And I wanted to thank you all for coming out on this really rainy, yucky day, so thank you for being here. Now, I'd like you to imagine you are in an art museum. You walk through the corridors. It's a quiet day. You have the place to yourself. You walk through the galleries leisurely, perhaps stopping to notice a painting that appeals to you, its color, its style, its subject. You move on, noticing that the air and light in the museum is somehow different than, say, a library, a classroom, or even your own home. Then you see a work that catches your attention in a significant way. It's kind of like Paul on the road to Damascus. The work calls to you, and you just have to pause and experience it, and it has to experience you. This is exactly what happened to the poet Rilke when he wrote his poem, The Archaic Torso of Apollo. I have projected an image of one of many of such sculptures, and I want to remind you that Apollo was the god of truth, and generally depicted as a young man in perfect physical condition. Here's the poem. We cannot know his legendary head with eyes like ripening fruit, and yet his torso is still suffused with brilliance from inside, like a lamp in which his gaze, now turned to low, gleams in all its power. Otherwise, the curved breast could not dazzle you so, nor could a smile run through the placid hips and thighs to that dark center where procreation flared. Otherwise, this stone would seem defaced beneath the translucent cascade of the shoulders and would not glisten like a wild beast's fur, would not from all the borders of itself burst like a star. For here, there is no place that does not see you. You must change your life. Rilke uses the absence of the head and the eyes particularly to show the power of art. Even in the absence of the completed sculpture, there is no place that does not see you. The sculpture's power transcends mutilation and the ravages of time. The poem itself illustrates the power of art squared. The sculpture inspired Rilke, and Rilke now inspires us. And what does art inspire us to? To become better, to change your life. And in Rilke's hands, it's not a suggestion, it's not a challenge, it's not a competition, it's a commandment. Rilke, of course, might have had Shakespeare in his poetic rearview mirror. Who cannot forget Sonnet 55? And I'm sure all of you remember Sonnet 55, right? No, none of us know what Sonnet 55 is. It's only when we see the first lines that we remember what Sonnet 55 is. Not marble nor the gilded monuments of princes shall outlive this powerful rhyme. Unlike Rilke, Shakespeare claims that words, not marble or monuments, will be the last art form standing. And we're going to see that as we go through some of these artists. You know, everybody thinks they have the best art form. Okay, poets think poetry's the best, dramatists think theater's the best, painters think painting is the best. So that's going to be one of the themes that we'll see. And while they might quibble over rocks, both clearly articulate art's power to move, shape, and memorialize us. And who can argue with that? Since Matthew Panesi began his discussion on the common good with Gilgamesh, I figured I could at least go back to the Middle Ages. Throughout history, the Catholic Church has understood the power of art to inspire its members. And we could probably spend an entire year examining the way religious art has been used throughout the ages. One of my favorites is a reading called the Anchronowis, or A Guide for Anchoresses. The book was originally created for three sisters who chose to live the contemplative life, and it became used more frequently for more and more anchorites throughout the 13th century. What is an anchorite? How are they different than the other contemplative orders of the time? Well, we see in this picture a little face encased in a little house. And that's exactly what the anchorites were. They were people, mostly women originally, but men also, who were encased in little houses, little cells, attached to a church. And they literally lived their lives there. And the ceremony that sent them into these little houses was almost like the act, on the Mass of the Dead, because they were dying to the world and going to a new life. Okay, you see the little window there where the anchoress peeks out and will get food and give advice to the outside world, but there was another little window on the other side that faced the church where they would receive sacraments and witness the Mass and things like that. In this book, the author encourages an imaginative contemplation of the crucifix. So we have the work of art, the crucifix, and the anchorites are asked to really experience the wounds of Christ. And they're even asked to imagine crawling into these wounds. So the use of art in terms of religious contemplation was really, really encouraged early on in the church. Church architecture, too, encourages worshipers to view God in many ways. Gothic architecture during the late High Middle Ages clearly illustrated the power not only of God, but the Catholic Church. This is pretty impressive, right? This is the west front of Notre Dame, and here we have the inside. We are little, God is big. We are little, the church is big. That's a powerful message. How can you not be struck by the power, majesty, and beauty? We're supposed to be impressed, and we are. The Catholic Church at the time also realized the power of drama. And when it became clear that the faithful were not well schooled in their catechism or Bible stories, the church took the show on the road through mystery plays, which told the story of salvation from creation, Adam and Eve, to the final judgment. So we get these, Bible stories throughout the whole thing. The plays were performed on carts by various guilds, by various people who had expertise. Here we get the woodworkers doing the Noah's Ark because they could build an ark, okay? There were people who dealt with silver, and they were used for the harrowing of hell because you need a lot of noisy things. Then Christ goes down to, Satan and says, I've conquered death, and they have a lot of noise. These plays are amazing, and you should watch them if you ever get a chance. Toronto, the University of Toronto still does these plays, and this is a picture of Noah's Ark and the story of the flood. And one of the big burning questions in the Middle Ages at this time was, hey, what the heck? You destroyed the evil people. We have this big flood. How come there's still evil in the world? Okay, nobody's thinking, well, the original sin, we all carry evil with us, blah, blah, blah. No. They needed somebody to blame. Who do they blame? Noah's wife, okay? She's famous. She's famous for her disobedience. She's out there. There's Noah working away, the boys working away on this ark, getting the animals together. She's out drinking beer with her friends, gossiping, having a good time, and she has to literally be pulled back on the ark. She's like, no, it's not raining that hard. And I'm like, no, you have to come. So that's how we get evil in the world. They had miracle plays like Everyman. Several years ago we did that as part of Panther Players. And it is basically a practical play on how to die, how to prepare for death. And it's got great advice. Do good deeds, be active in your religious faith, whatever that may be. It's Catholic in this case. But make a will and don't expect anyone to go with you on this journey. You're doing it alone. And there are some really funny moments when every man asks his family and friends to come along. They're like, not today. I have a cramp in my foot. I can't go. And there are these lovely little moments, very realistic moments. With the Reformation and the Protestant Revolution in Western Europe, came a de-emphasis on a lot of religious visual art, and a greater emphasis on the word, print culture. Okay, we've got the Bible. You now have access to it if you're a Protestant. And thanks to Dr. Riley, I knew about Sarah Vowell's Wordy Shipmates, a great book which looks at the Protestant emphasis on the word and how it really created a different culture in the founding of the United States of America. It's a really great book to read, very, very interesting. But in Europe at the time, basically the Protestant Reformation resulted in the churches getting rid of a lot of Catholic clutter. You notice here, no paintings, no stained glass window. The center of this church is the pulpit where the word will be read and discussed. And, it's a very different experience. That does not mean, however, that Protestants were unaware of the power of art or propaganda. One of my favorite propagandists, Queen Elizabeth, who navigated Catholic and Protestant factions brilliantly, partly by making herself the center of the world, not religious dogma. She knew what the image could do to people, and she was a master at, creating her own poetry, having her images marketed and spread. This is one of my favorite paintings of her, the Armada portrait, okay? At the time, England was struggling to make itself a world power. Spain wanted to invade and get rid of this Protestant stuff, return to Catholicism, and they sent their armada, their navy, to do that. And thanks to a lot of good luck, planning, and good weather, the British actually beat the Spanish Armada, which was amazing, and established both England and Elizabeth as important world powers. You see here the Spanish Armada before and the Spanish Armada after. It's dark, all those ships have crashed on rocks, and even the figure of death is standing there. We know who's in charge. There's no doubt who's in charge here. And perhaps your own experiences with art are like these historical examples that I've given you. Art is powerful. It affects us. I know my experiences with art have affected me. I've got a couple examples. This summer, for example, my son and I went to Cleveland to take care of my ailing mother. It was a bad day. She had a lot of requests. She was impatient. And my son, who's very easygoing, and he was even losing his affability. He was really, When it was time to head home, both of us were beat, and we both thought about skipping one of the destinations we thought we'd go to, after this, taking care of her, the Cleveland Museum of Art. We had planned on visiting it as a reward for our work, but we were both so frazzled and emotionally drained, we thought, let's just get on the road and come back to Columbus. We did not. We spent several hours wandering the galleries, and if you have not been there, you need to go and you need to see this medieval art collection. It's amazing. But we looked at Asian art, and we even looked at some modern art pieces that some people might find objectionable. We returned to the car, ended up arguing about the virtues of hip-hop and its indebtedness to American jazz. I said, hip-hop is terrible. Why do you even listen to it? And my son was like, no, it's jazz. It has roots in jazz. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. So we had this, seriously, this is one of the most amazing conversations I've had with my son ever. And it's going to be something that I'm going to remember until I die. Art literally brought us back to life. In one of the earliest essays on art, The Poetics, and this is the best translation and version ever, so just write that down. You may disagree with it, but I love this version. Aristotle defines a perfect tragedy so well that we still use terms today, not just about drama, but all narrative, all stories, plot, character, theme, setting. I mean, he came up with these ideas, and we still use them today. He also talks about something called catharsis, and drama scholars will argue about this until the cows come home. But the basic idea is that art does affect us in a positive way. As Sister Joan mentioned, you watch a tragedy where somebody really messes up, and you think, whoa, I'm going to be careful about this. You know, I'm going to think about this. Later writers like Oscar Wilde, and I love Oscar Wilde, but he's got this wrong. He advocates that art is just art. It simply is. It doesn't do anything to us, it just is. And I can best describe this attitude through another personal story. In another lifetime, I was the education director for a local theater company. And part of my job was getting money out of people, whatever way, shape, or form possible. And it was always challenging. We constantly had to show that the plays were doing something to the students, to the audiences, you know, making them better, SAT scores and things like that. And I went to Minneapolis on another mission and met this French theater group because I knew they were there, and I thought I'm going to go talk to them and see what their lives are like. And many of their performers went to Cirque du Soleil and or came from Cirque du Soleil, but the things that they did in Minneapolis were really, really edgy. They weren't, you know, Las Vegas super shows. They were edgy dramas. And so I asked them how they raise money, and the artistic director looked at me as if I had two heads, took a long drag off his cigarette with that beautiful French nose, and said, "We are artists." I'm like, really? That's what you do? We are artists. It never worked in Columbus. I could never get it to work. I just could never get it to work. And some of you might be studying English theory with new critics, okay? They too look at art as this, you know, closed system. And it's really tempting to look at art that way because it's difficult to measure the effects of art. How do we know art is affecting us? How do we know that, you know, television is rotting our brain? How do we know that this other work of art is making us better? It's very difficult, but I'm going to try anyway. And you can disagree with me. But here I need to pause and admit that art does have this dark side. And we'll see, you know, some examples here that maybe aren't the greatest inspiration for humankind. It can lead us to selfishness and intolerance. And for some, because of this dark side of art, a lot of people want to censor things, okay? And I think maybe we should talk about that next year when we talk about truth, you know? Oh, I forgot this. Early filmmakers were concerned about the power of film. And they came up with a censorship code called the Hays Code, okay? And I talked about that in another presentation a couple years ago. It prohibited kissing, sex, and the glorification of crime. As you can tell, we no longer have that code in force, you know, it's blown away. But is censorship the best approach to art's edgy side? Is that the best approach? There's a great defense of free speech. John Milton's Areopagitica, I won't go into it, but 16th century says, no, we gotta let everything go. We can't censor anything. But I do want to acknowledge that art does have a double-edged, side. Getting back to its power in a positive way, one of the greatest and perhaps most well-known examples in American culture was mentioned in our common text for the freshman core course, The Storytelling Animal by Jonathan Gottschall, who argues that storytelling makes us human. And he mentions a number of books that influence culture in a significant way, most notably Uncle Tom's Cabin, which he said polarized the American public at the time, but it also energized the abolitionist movement, the anti-slavery movement. When in the midst of the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln met Harriet Beecher Stowe, the author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, he famously said, "So you're the little woman who wrote the book that made this great war." And this is a sculpture from the Stowe Center in Connecticut, commemorating that event. A story, a work of art, mobilized a nation to do the right thing. The use of art to make a difference and influence politics is an interesting study, and I thought I would show you some examples from graphic design because I needed to use this equipment here that Mark and Will set up for me. So we're going to look at graphic design for the media portion of this presentation. And while I was researching this, I found this great book by two women called Graphic Design History, A Critical Guide, and they noted that during World War I, there were sort of these two movements of art, the avant-garde, which promoted chaos and anarchy, and then the advertising, industry that was coming into its own. And here we have an example of the advertising imagery here, encouraging people to eat a particular food for the war effort and to, sort of save money and things like that. They say it prompted the World War I prompted the development of mechanized military technology as well as mass propaganda strategies. Artists of every stripe lent their graphic skills to promote readiness, recruitment, sales of bonds, discipline on the home front, and other war-related efforts. Familiar poster styles allowed the transition to armed conflict seem more like an everyday occurrence, nothing unusual. Also, in England and the United States, images of heroism and valor were accompanied by hand-lettered texts. Images of domesticity reminded soldiers what they were fighting for and gave women, children, and older people roles of steadfast patience and courage. Stereotypes of bravery and sacrifice reinforced the sense that the Allied cause was a preservation of humanity itself. Okay, and you see sort of two views on this. Here, buy bonds, and you are part of the military effort with the reference to St. Joan. And then here, encourage your men to go off and fight for war, and that's how you become patriotic. Two kinds of, but both using women and children to promote this idea. A couple weeks ago, we were talking with Dr. Riley and Sister Maddie about this poster, the iconic "I Want You" for the U.S. Army. This is American designer James Montgomery Flagg. That is him, okay? He used himself as the model here. And what he does here is he brings together that avant-garde and advertising trend in graphic design and creates a new way of speaking. New verbal and visual rhetoric came into use. Direct graphic address in the second person was very unusual, very confrontational. You didn't see that before this time. But as I was thinking about it, I've got another picture that I need to think about. But the decorum of an earlier era would never have allowed such directness, and it continues to be a source of patriotic, imagery. We use this all the time. While these artists tried to sell the war to Allied forces, poets like Wilfred Owen later lamented the war in his famous anti-war poem, Dulce et Decorum Est, a poem which questions the idea of whether or not it is noble to die for your country, to participate in these kinds of activities. But you cannot deny the importance of imagery in getting the women to vote, getting women, the right to vote. Here's two images that were prominent at the time. The top one, you have the angel in the house, the perfect woman with the baby. Don't vote, just keep her at home, keep her protected. And look at the evil suffragette on the street. Her hair is a mess. She looks insane. And then there was this other image of the Gibson girl, actually out, at the beach with her friends. What image would win? The new woman won, thankfully. So women got the right to vote. And it's difficult to imagine Prohibition's passage without many of the cartoons that were created at the time by the Anti-Saloon League. Daddy's in there, little girl and her brother outside the saloon doors. So are our clothes and food, and they're never coming out. They're really manipulative. There were plays, The Little Brown Jug, Seeing the Elephant, or We're All Teetotalers Now. And this encouraged Americans to steel themselves against spirits and wine, beer, and liquor for a long time. During the 30s, the posters continued, and in World War II, we used images as well, the famous Rosie the Riveter. But, sort of on a negative side, they dehumanized the enemy by creating racial stereotypes. So we have the Nazis, it doesn't even look like a human, and then the Pacific, theater being represented as, raping our white women, almost monstrous face there. So that's, sort of not so good. But it's effective. You dehumanize your enemy. They're not even real human beings. So, it's okay to kill them. Another famous painting at this time was Picasso's Guernica, a painting that memorialized the Nazi bombing of a small town of the same name in Spain. Guernica was known for its resistance to the Nazi dictator Francisco Franco, and with the bombing, many, many innocents were killed. And Picasso hears about this. He's living in France. He's been commissioned to do a mural for the 1937 World's Fair. He says, I can't do it. I need to memorialize Guernica. And he does this, and he shows it in Paris, and suddenly people around the world become aware of what's going on in Spain. So this painting really made a difference. And it continues to be used and cited as an anti-war symbol. You just see the chaos and the carnage here. Okay, an advertisement here for next year. In a great play that I hope we use next year in our discussion of truth, called Taking Sides, playwright Ronald Harwood dramatizes the life of German conductor Wilhelm Furtwängler. Okay, and you all know who Wilhelm Furtwängler. No one knows who Wilhelm Furtwängler is because he was blacklisted by the Americans. During the denazification trials that were held by the Allies to kind of stamp out Nazis and then put them on trial and things like that, Furtwängler's called to defend his actions. And in the play, there's this character named Major Steve Arnold from America, and he's interrogating Furtwängler. Through the course of the play, we have art pitted against politics. And one of the difficulties is Furtwängler stayed in Nazi Germany and played for Hitler. And Furtwängler argues, no, I used my art to inspire. He says, for example, I know that a single performance of a masterpiece was stronger and more vital, a stronger and more vital negation of the spirit of Buchenwald and Auschwitz than words. Human beings are free wherever Wagner and Beethoven are played. Music transported them to regions where the torturers and murderers could do them no harm. Okay? It's an interesting concept, and music especially, sound, being able to transmit maybe more effectively than sight. It's interesting. Steve Arnold, a very plain-spoken American from Chicago who likes jazz, and refers to Furtwängler, this amazing conductor, as a band leader. He says, you're a band leader. He's not buying this artsy defense. He's like, no way. Have you ever smelled burning flesh? I smelled it 4 miles away. 4 miles away I smelled it. I smell it now. I smell it at night because I can't sleep anymore with the stench in my nostrils. I'll smell it for the rest of my life. Have you seen the crematoria and gas ovens? Have you seen the mounds of rotting corpses being shoveled into gigantic craters by the men and women who murdered them? I saw these things with my own eyes. And I've seen it every night, night after night, and I wake screaming seeing it. You talk to me about culture and art and music? The play concludes inviting the audience to take sides. Did Furtwängler's art uplift the Germans and remind them of their divinity? Or did Furtwängler use his art selfishly to indulge his own passions at the expense of others? It's really interesting. Later, the WPA used posters to advocate behaviors and moral perspectives. The premise of the WPA was that art should enter the daily lives of Americans. And the posters advocated just, mundane things like brushing your teeth, eating fruit, don't run over, wildlife. And according to studies, the benefits to individuals and the public were indisputable. At this time, too, photojournalism and documentary developed. The Farm Security Administration, for example, commissioned journalists and photographers to document the lives of America's rural poor. It published works by artists such as Dorothea Lange, Margaret Burke White. Such works created awareness and sympathy for the poor in the United States. The examples are innumerable. And Drucker and McVarish, for example, note that street art, posters, guerrilla art were effective in raising awareness about many, many political issues. But they say no movement used graphic imagery as effectively to advocate mass action as the American anti-war movement in the 60s and 70s. And many of you who are old enough to remember those, I read about it in books. So anyway, we'll remember some of these: make love, not war, and war is not healthy for children and other living things. And look what they do to the I Want You. They change it. It's like this war is nothing like the wars in the past. It's different. We have to get out. And they were famous for using famous posters or art and transforming it into anti-war statements. Recent docudramas on terrorism, torture, and intolerance, and I have to really push the drama at the end, so we're getting to the end here. Having raised awareness regarding such issues, plays such as Speaking Truth to Power, which we should do next year too, by Ariel Dorfman, was based on interviews with human rights workers around the world, and it shows the power of one voice to make a difference. The Guys by Ann Nelson is about a fire captain who must write all the eulogies for the New York firefighters killed on 9/11. It was started in a little theater in the middle of nowhere starring Sigourney Weaver and Bill Murray, and then it was made into a film. Guantanamo, Honor Bound to Defend Freedom, questions the U.S.'s right to detain and the toll such actions take on democratic values. David Hare's Stuff Happens offers a caustic commentary on 9/11. Tony Kushner's Homebody Kabul depicts the corruption and hardship in Afghanistan. Michael Weller's Beast imagines the Iraq war dead returning home and confronting, people and the military about this. Alan Rickman's production of My Name is Rachel Corrie, about an American activist who criticized the Israeli treatment of the Palestinians, created more drama outside the theater than in the theater. And it is impossible to imagine the recent condemnation of hate crimes against homosexuals without thinking of the Laramie Project, which dramatizes the circumstances surrounding the death of Matthew Shepard in Laramie, Wyoming, and which has been performed around the country in high schools, churches, and theaters. There's a great, great role for the Catholic priest in this too, because he says we can't be like this. We can't beat up people who are different than us. Another recent play, The Exonerated, presents stories of exonerated prisoners, and what we learn is not surprising. If you are poor and accused of a crime in this country, you are likely to go to prison. The governor of Illinois at the time suspended executions as a result of this play. Why so much drama? Well, because I like it, but also because because partly with a drama, you can attract an audience in a quick and inexpensive manner. To create a film or even an advertisement today costs so much money, so much time, so much, pull. And a lot of corporations manipulate, the media. So a street front store, a garage, a black box theater, like the LVC at Ohio Dominican, which we could turn that into a little black box theater, a script, and a few others are all that it takes to start changing the world. And a lot of these plays that I gave to you started that way. For Arthur Miller, art has always been the revenge of the human spirit upon the short-sighted. I love that. Consider the sublime achievements of Greece, the necrophilic grandeur of the Egyptians, the glory of the Romans, and what are we left with but a handful of plays, essays, carved stones, and some strokes of paint on paper or the rock cave on the wall. In a word, art. The ironies abound. Artists are not particularly famous for their conformity with majority mores, but whatever is not turned into art disappears. Tolstoy once remarked that what we look for in a work of art is the revelation of the artist's soul, a glimpse of God. Art does, can, and will affect our world. It is not merely entertainment. And this is what concerns me in our culture today, is that art becomes merely a distraction, just another distraction. It is a means to change the world, and like many throughout this series, I have to conclude with a passage from Pope Francis. Proclaiming Christ means showing that to believe in and to follow him is not only something right and true, but also something beautiful, capable of filling life with new splendor, profound joy, even in the midst of difficulties. I want to put this picture up. Many of you might recognize this picture if you pray with a little prayer book called Magnificat. This is the November cover of the Magnificat. And so even today, people are using images to inspire their prayer life. This is a really interesting little painting that no one can agree on who painted it. But for today, it's somebody named Van Cleve. And it was intended to be used as contemplation, to help you with your contemplation, just like we did in the Middle Ages, okay? And one of the interesting things about the hand position is this is not the peace sign of the Vietnam War. This is not that sign. It's the sign of a rabbi, a rabbinical pose of teaching, where Christ is teaching us. So Francis says, proclaiming Christ means showing that to believe in and to follow him is not only something right and true, but also something beautiful, capable of filling life with new splendor and profound joy, even in the midst of difficulties. And I hope that you will find art in your life and art here at Ohio Dominican and find some great beauty for you. Thank you very much. I appreciate your being here. Thank you.